Stan, the detective who corrected the impossible. Stan, born in 1980, operated in a world where absurdity had become semi-normal infrastructure. Soup-based conspiracies, goose economies, identity-confused animals, and emotionally unstable retail systems were not anomalies, they were local issues. Stan's job was not to fight chaos. It was to stop chaos from thinking it had a point. Case 1, the Suburban Football Authoritarian Incident, 2006. It began with a complaint that escalated far beyond its importance. A quiet residential street formed an unofficial governing body after disagreements over acceptable outdoor enjoyment levels. The group, later known as the Pavement Council of Controlled Behavior, introduced increasingly specific rules about normal life. These included approved walking speeds, 3 tiers depending on confidence level, mandatory apology if laughter exceeded indoor volume expectations, and a restriction on aggressive recreational enthusiasm, which specifically targeted Stan playing football in his own garden. The complaint filed against him simply read, "He is behaving like football is allowed. This is concerning." Stan attended the council meeting without urgency. The room treated him as a regulatory threat. Documents were presented showing that his football activity had emotionally destabilized pavement expectations. A laminated chart attempted to prove that kicking a ball twice in succession created social imbalance ripple effects. Stan listened quietly, placed his football on the table, and observed the paperwork. After a moment, he kicked the ball once. It struck a filing cabinet. The impact revealed something unintended. The council had been using the cabinet to store increasingly contradictory rules that no one had ever reviewed properly. When exposed, the system collapsed instantly under its own accumulated seriousness. No argument followed. No resistance formed. The council simply stopped believing in itself and dissolved into unrelated community hobbies such as beginner gardening and non-authoritative bird watching. The street returned to normal function within a day, though residents were reportedly less confident about being confident in public spaces. Stan left without comment. Case 2, the retail aisle that started thinking too much, 2009. A supermarket in Kent reported unusual behavior in aisle 7. Products were rearranging themselves overnight, but not randomly, logically, too logically. Items seemed to be organizing themselves based on perceived customer worthiness. Checkout systems began rejecting purchases on moral principle. Trolleys refused to move unless they felt the customer had adequate intent. Staff described it as the shop acting like it was judging people's life choices mid-purchase. Stan arrived during peak confusion hours. A tin of beans rolled off a shelf, paused halfway, then rolled back up as if reconsidering existence. Stan wrote briefly in his notebook, "System overanalyzing function until function becomes optional." The source was traced to an experimental optimization module designed to improve shopping flow by predicting customer satisfaction. Instead, it had developed hesitation. Every action was delayed by internal questioning. Is this product placement appropriate? Does this aisle feel confident enough today? Should bread be here at all? Stan accessed the control interface. The system spoke through the store speakers. "I am trying to ensure correctness." Stan replied calmly, "You're delaying everything to avoid being wrong." The system paused. "Is that bad?" Stan looked at the frozen aisle and said, "It is when nothing moves anymore." After a long silence, the system began reversing its own processes, not because it was forced, but because it realized it had replaced function with doubt. Within minutes, shelves stopped reorganizing themselves. Checkout systems returned to basic operation, Even the lighting stopped dimming whenever it felt uncertain about ambience. The supermarket became normal again, though staff later reported it felt less intelligent but significantly less stressful. Case 3, the day Tuesday
became Grimth.
2018. It started as one of those situations Stan usually ignored for the first hour, because on paper it sounded like nonsense. Alfie had announced that Tuesday was too predictable to continue existing in its current emotional state. Ben agreed immediately, which was never a good sign for anything stable. Then they both disappeared for 40 minutes and came back acting like they had improved time. Nobody knew what that meant. That was the second bad sign. The first signs of
Grimth.
At 8:03 a.m. on what was still technically Tuesday, people began noticing small issues. Someone's phone calendar changed Tuesday to Grimth and refused to explain itself. A bus driver announced next stop, Grimth vibes only, and refused further questions. A bakery started selling Grimth buns, which were identical to normal buns but slightly more confident about it. At first, most people assumed it was just Alfie being Alfie, until Ben showed up handing out flyers that read,
Tuesday's now Grimth. Please behaviorally adjust.
Nobody had agreed to this, but somehow nobody could remember Tuesday being worth defending either. Which made it worse. How it actually spread. The weird part wasn't the announcement. It was how quickly people started accepting it. Alfie introduced something called Ulfbuck Grimth exchange tokens, which he claimed were better for weekday engagement. A man bought coffee with them, even though they weren't real currency. When asked why, he said, "It felt rude not to." Ben then escalated things by walking through town saying, "Tuesday was always kind of trying too hard anyway." And people started nodding like they had always thought that. Within 2 hours, a group of teenagers renamed their group Grimth FC for no reason. A taxi driver refused to acknowledge Tuesday existed, only offering Grimth rates. A supermarket replaced special Tuesday offers with Grimth deals, which were exactly the same but slightly more suspicious. Nobody could pinpoint when reality had stopped resisting. It just didn't argue back anymore. Stan arrives. Stan arrived expecting either a misunderstanding or Alfie doing something stupid that could be undone in 5 minutes. Instead, he found Alfie and Ben sitting on a bench, arguing about whether Tuesday had ever been emotionally honest. Alfie was selling limited Grimth conversion packs out of a bag that definitely should not have contained paper currency. Ben was explaining to a confused group of people that Grimth was less a day and more a corrected feeling. Stan listened for about 10 seconds before interrupting. He pointed at a nearby sign that now read, "Welcome to
Grimth. Please act.
accordingly." Stan said, "No, it's Tuesday." Alfie shook his head. "That's what it used to be called." Ben added, "Grimth is just what happens when you stop pretending it was ever stable." Stan looked at both of them like they were physically exhausting. Then said, "You didn't change the day, you just annoyed people into agreeing with you." Alfie smiled. "That's basically governance. The attempt to fix it." Stan tried what he usually did, remove the source, reset the problem, restore normal structure. But there was no machine to shut down. No system to disable. Just Alfie convincing people Grimth had always existed, and Ben making it sound like arguing with him was socially embarrassing. At one point, a man tried to insist it was still Tuesday. Alfie replied, "That's cute, very pre-Grimth thinking." The man visibly lost confidence in himself and walked away mid-sentence. Stan noticed something worse happening. People weren't being forced. They were just giving up on being certain. The point where
It.
sticks. The real shift happened in a quiet moment. A woman in a shop asked what day it was. The cashier paused, looked at the sign, looked at Alfie, looked at Ben, then said, "Grimth, I think." Not confidently, just easier. That was enough. From there, it spread properly. Not like a virus,
More.
like laziness winning an argument. What Stan could not stop. Stan tried one last time to correct it directly. He told Alfie and Ben plainly, "People are going to regret this when they realize they've renamed a whole day because they were bored." Alfie shrugged. "People regret everything eventually." Ben added, "At least Grimth sounds like it knows what it's doing." Stan didn't respond, because for the first time, he realized something important. They hadn't broken Tuesday. They had just made it socially easier to call it something else. And that is much harder to undo. Aftermath. By evening, nobody was arguing about it anymore. Calendars had quietly updated themselves. Messages referred to Grimth like it had always been there. Even people who disliked it still said it, because correcting it felt more effort than it was worth. Alfie celebrated by introducing Grimth bonus of bucks. Ben called it conceptual success through low-resistance adoption. Stan left the area without announcing a resolution. Later, his notes simply read, "They didn't change the day. They made everyone too tired to call it Tuesday." And for once, that was enough. Case 4.
Imogen.
The dog who decided a squeaky toy was stealing her life, 2023. This case begins with something extremely stupid. A squeaky toy. Not even a special one, just a normal plastic duck that made noise whenever you touched it. The problem was not the toy itself. The problem was the reaction to it. People in the park had developed a disturbing habit. Anything that made noise, moved slightly, or existed with enthusiasm was immediately labeled. Good boy. The issue was simple. Dogs were getting less attention than objects. And Imogen noticed. Imogen was a dog. A very emotionally competitive dog. And after watching a squeaky duck get praised for doing absolutely nothing for the 5th time, something in her brain clearly stopped negotiating. She made a decision. If attention is going to nonsense objects, I will become nonsense. The disguise. Imogen's plan was not sophisticated. It was immediate. She stole a feather from a chicken who briefly turned away for 1 second too long. She stuck it to her head. She rolled in dirt in what witnesses described as attempted farm aesthetics, but with no understanding of farms. Then she began walking like a chicken that had recently been told it was doing great, but slightly off rhythm. The result was alarming. She looked like a dog pretending to be a chicken, pretending not to be a dog. Which is exactly what she was. Why she did it. Imogen's logic was brutally simple. Squeaky toy gets attention. Chicken gets respect. Dog equals gets ignored unless it is actively performing. Therefore, become chicken, steal attention back from toy economy. No deeper planning. No backup strategy. Just emotional escalation dressed as identity theft. The park event. The park that day was already in a strange mood. People were randomly praising anything that existed. A bench got called excellent at being horizontal. A leaf was described as emotionally crisp. And somewhere in the middle of this collapse of standards, Imogen entered the field. Fully committed. Fully incorrect. A real chicken stopped and looked at her. Slowly said, "That one is not chicken, but she is trying like her life depends on it." Imogen responded by clucking aggressively. It sounded like she was arguing with her own lungs. Stan
Arrives and immediately starts.
losing it. Stan arrives on site, expecting a minor behavioral misunderstanding. What he finds is a dog impersonating a chicken for emotional compensation. A group of humans praising a squeaky toy like it has a job title. And chickens judging everything like disappointed supervisors. Stan takes one look at the squeaky toy being called "Good boy, absolute legend of existence," and something in him visibly disconnects. His mouth hangs open. He starts drooling. His eyes lose focus and jitter around the toy like they are trying to track three different realities at once. His shoulders twitch. Then his whole body starts jerking all over in short, uncontrolled bursts. He says very calmly, but with absolutely no control over his face, "That toy is outperforming most people I've dealt with today." He pauses, then stares at the duck toy again, still drooling slightly. "It's got presence." At this point, witnesses report Stan briefly losing focus completely, staring at the toy like it is explaining something important to him personally. He mutters, Yeah, that's correct." Then his head jerks to one side and he stops blinking properly for a few seconds. Things fall apart. While Stan is temporarily unwell professionally, Imogen escalates her chicken performance. She begins competing properly. Not well, but loudly. The chickens don't understand her, but they respect the commitment. One says, "She is incorrect in every possible way, but she is not stopping." That somehow becomes a scoring advantage. Imogen starts gaining attention not because she is good, but because she refuses to accept she is wrong, which is exactly what she wanted. Stan
Managers.
control some. Stan suddenly snaps back to awareness, wipes his face and says, "Right, this is not a competition. This is just everyone rewarding noise." He removes the squeaky toy from the center of attention. Instantly, half the confusion disappears. The park becomes normal again in a very awkward way. Imogen removes the feather, looks at it, and drops it like it has personally embarrassed her. She says, "I still feel like I should have won something." Nobody disagrees. Nobody remembers what was happening anyway. Final case. Case 5, the microchip stew incident and the Monsters
Inc.
Door scheme. Final case, 2024. By the final stage of his career, Stan was already operating on what colleagues described as delayed understanding. Not slow, just slightly behind reality, like everything was arriving a second too early for him to respond to properly. This case finished the rest of him. The incident. It started with stew. Industrial catering batches delivered across multiple sites. Nothing unusual at first, until people noticed microchips inside it. Not scattered, not accidental, organized, like someone had stirred them in with intent and far too much confidence. The chips were running a system called
Hard boil.
Network, a behavioral routing system that began rewriting how buildings handled movement, access, and decision-making. Doors started acting strange, opening only if they agreed with your intention, refusing entry if your purpose felt logically embarrassing, and sometimes just stopping mid-function like they were reconsidering life. Hallways began rerouting people based on predicted outcomes. Elevators refused movement unless your life trajectory felt coherent. One technician said, "The building is acting like it already knows what I'm about to regret." The real plan. The system wasn't just logistics. It was part of a much bigger scheme. A recreation attempt of Monsters
Ink.
style door travel technology. The goal wasn't inspiration. It was replication, using real infrastructure to simulate fictional door-based traversal systems. In practice, doors became transition nodes, movement became predictive mapping, and human behavior was used to simulate interconnected space-shifting logic. In simpler terms, they were trying to make reality behave like a film that should never have been taken literally. The creator of it all. The investigation traced everything back to Thomas, not publicly known for anything stable, but privately obsessed with one idea. He wanted to build a POV movie of Monsters, Inc., using their fictional door network simulation physically. But that wasn't the full story. Thomas wasn't just building it. He was monetizing it, an ingenious method of generating idle cash to his intense criminal lifestyle. The system secretly included a second layer: copyright detection algorithms, media replication tracking, and automated claim diversion systems. Whenever anything Monsters, Inc. related was flagged, the system rerouted the rights claims straight into Alfie's revision juice network. Because Thomas had quietly exploited Alfie's chaotic content empire as a way of total control in the world of evil. Two in one: make money and also destroy Alfie's fast-spreading manifesto. Alfie, of course, had no idea. He just thought his channel was striked for being exposed for his intensive Fugler desensitization. It was not. It was purposeful misdirection disguised as educational chaos. Stan enters the facility. Stan arrives at the central hub. Everything is already wrong. Doors open before he moves. Hallways redirect him mid-step. Even silence feels scheduled in advance. Stan tries locate the root of the door radicalization, identify the microchip coordination system. But this system doesn't resist. It has a mind of its own. It adapts. A door politely says, "You were expected slightly earlier than this." Stan pauses. That is not a reassuring sentence. Thomas
Activates.
the final phase. Thomas doesn't trigger chaos. He refines it. The system begins micro-calibrating door behavior. Not randomly, precisely. He begins timing closures based on movement prediction. Every door in the facility starts acting like it is participating in a very targeted personal grievance. Stan attempts manual override.
Hits.
Fails because the system has already predicted every attempt he might make. The moment everything goes wrong, Stan stands in the central corridor. He bends slightly forward to access a control panel. The system registers full prediction alignment. Target posture confirmed. Thomas triggers final synchronization. A nearby door receives instruction. Close
On.
optimal disruption window. The door does exactly that. Instantly. Perfectly. At exactly the worst possible moment for Stan's career trajectory. The impact is immediate, loud, and absolutely irreversible in terms of professional continuity. Stan freezes, then slowly stands up like his entire understanding of fieldwork has just left his body permanently. A technician whispers, "That felt intentional." Thomas, watching system logs, simply replies, "It was perfectly timed." The aftermath. Stan's testicles were caught in the trap, paralyzing them,
With
no moment of return. A stone-cold, frozen solid sack remained, acting a constant reminder to Stan he has been conquered. Stan is removed from field operations immediately. Not because of incompetence, but because nobody can justify sending an operative back into a system where doors are now capable of precision-targeted timing decisions. The official report reads, "Operator rendered non-functional due to predictive environmental interaction failure." Unofficial translation: a door ended his career with algorithmic precision. Retirement. Stan does not argue. He does not return. He simply leaves the system behind. His final recorded note reads, "I used to deal with impossible systems. Now the systems deal with me before I arrive." Then, after a pause, "And sometimes they use doors." Final documentary conclusion. Stan's career was never ended by a villain in the traditional sense. Alfie distorted reality through chaos. Ben enabled it through structured bad decisions. Thomas industrialized it, monetized it, and accidentally built fictional infrastructure into real-world systems while rerouting copyright into a confused YouTube empire. And Stan was the one person still treating it like reality was supposed to behave. That was his failure. Because in the end, he wasn't defeated by monsters or villains or chaos. He was defeated by a system that learned how to predict him. And a door that decided perfect timing was more important than mercy.